You know that feeling when something small, almost stupid, knocks the air out of you? For me, it was a photo. Just one photo. Not even one I took. And not even one I was supposed to see. I wasn't planning to come home early. That part's important. I wasn't trying to catch anyone off guard or set up some big surprise. I just wanted my own damn pillow, the creaky comfort of our old mattress, and the weird way our hallway light flickers when it turns on. I'd been on a business trip for 4 days, meetings, hotel coffee, shaking hands with people who smelled like cologne and ambition. Dallas was hot, the kind of heat that follows you into your clothes, and I was tired of smiling through it. My flight landed mid-afternoon. I texted Lindsay that I might get back late the next day. Figured I'd catch a hotel near the airport, decompress. But halfway into the drive, I missed her. I missed our dog-eared routine. I missed the sound she makes when she's stirring creamer into her coffee, like she's trying not to clink the spoon too loud. So I drove home instead. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was still out but starting its lazy descent. Our neighborhood was quiet. The same kid's scooter was tipped over on the sidewalk. Our neighbor's sprinklers were going off. Everything felt normal. Then I saw the tablet. It was sitting on the passenger seat. A shared tablet, the one Lindsay kept for reading or streaming trashy reality shows in the car while she waited in parking lots. I'd always made jokes about how it belonged more to her than both of us. It had our shared cloud login, mostly syncing photos from holidays, receipts, or random **TS she'd forget to delete. I didn't even mean to pick it up. I was stretching, waiting for the air in the car to cool, and the screen lit up with a ping. Just a soft ding, almost polite. One new photo synced, July 11th, 3:41 p.m. No caption, no folder. Popped into the shared album Lindsay never bothered organizing. The thumbnail was blurry, but I recognized the colors. That deep navy comforter we'd picked out together at the Macy's closeout sale. The cream walls. The brass lamp I installed wrong the first time. It was our bedroom. I opened the photo, half thinking it might be an accidental **T or something innocent. But it wasn't. The sheets were a mess. Not forgot to make the bed messy, but used messy. Wrinkled in that specific, undeniable way. The pillows had shifted toward the center. And at the far right edge of the photo, almost cropped out, was a man's hand resting on the blanket. It wasn't mine. The skin was darker. His forearm was thicker with distinct veins. A leather bracelet, braided and worn, circled his wrist. I don't wear jewelry. I never have. My mind went blank. Not even racing yet, just blank. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering above it, wondering if somehow this was old, or part of a prank, or something I couldn't yet explain. But the metadata was right there. July 11th, 2 days ago. While I was in another city, giving a presentation about risk management to people who barely looked up from their phones. And someone else had been in my bedroom. In our bed. I didn't go inside. I sat in the car with the engine running, then eventually turned it off. For about 20 minutes I just stared ahead, watching the breeze push our porch swing into a slow sway. A single thought circled my head, over and over. This can't be real. Not Lindsay. Not my wife. She's the one who leaves voice notes instead of texts, because she says they feel more real. The one who cried when she found our neighbor's lost dog and then refused to give it back for a full week. She gets cold at night, wears fuzzy socks to bed, and always reads the last page of a book first. So I know if it's worth the heartbreak. I loved her for all of that. And now I wasn't even sure who she was. After aimlessly driving around the block for a while. Not even listening to music. Just floating. I parked 2 streets over and walked up the driveway as quietly as I could. The front door creaked open like it always did. I braced myself for confrontation, for maybe catching something mid-act, for even seeing that bracelet again, swinging from someone's wrist. But instead I found calm. Lindsay was on the couch, legs folded beneath her, eating something out of a bowl and watching a baking competition on mute. She didn't look startled, she looked confused. "Oh," she said, blinking slowly. "You're home early." That was it. No smile. No jump to hug me. Just a tone like I had messed up a schedule she hadn't told me about. I managed a stiff nod. Yeah. Flight was early. Thought I'd come home. She put the bowl down. You should have texted. I didn't think I had to. Her eyebrows lifted. Not annoyed, but cautious, like she was trying to figure out how much I knew. I sat across from her, my bag still slung over one shoulder, trying to steady my voice. There was a photo, I said, on the tablet. I watched her face closely. She didn't flinch. Not exactly, but she blinked slower, adjusted her sweatshirt sleeve, and crossed one leg over the other like she was buying time. Oh, she said after a pause. That. Yeah, I meant to delete that. Krista and her boyfriend stayed over. Guest room's AC is busted, so they used our room. I stared. And she took a photo? I asked. Of your bed? With him in it? Lindsay shrugged. She's weird. She sends me random stuff like that all the time. Said she thought it looked cozy or whatever. She has a dark sense of humor. His arm was in it. She tilted her head. I mean, he probably took a nap there. What's the big deal? I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to feel. I wanted to ask why Krista would send her a photo like that, why the room looked so freshly used, or why no one had mentioned it until now. Instead, I sat in silence. And that's when Lindsay flipped the script. Are you seriously mad about this? She asked, arms now crossed. Because you've been gone almost every week for the last 2 months. Do you even see how distant you've gotten? My mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't explaining. She was redirecting. I saw it now. The photo, the weirdly calm reaction, the quick switch to my behavior. It was like she had rehearsed it. You're always suspicious lately, she added. Like I can't have people over or exist without getting interrogated. And just like that, I was the bad guy. The one who couldn't trust his wife. The one who was overthinking. I didn't say anything more. I just nodded slowly, made some excuse about being tired, and went upstairs to unpack. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Not just the photo, but the way she responded. No shock, no confusion. Just instant deflection. Like she already had the story loaded and ready to fire. That's what stuck with me most. Not the picture, but how fast she turned it into my fault. The thing about suspicion is that once it plants itself, it doesn't need water or sun to grow. It takes root in your brain and spreads on its own. Quiet, steady, poisonous. That night after Lindsay redirected the entire conversation. After she sat there and made me feel crazy for reacting to a photo of another man's arm in our bed. I barely slept. I laid there beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly the ground beneath me had started to shift. And the worst part? I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to face it. There had been signs. Not just one or two, a trail of them. But when you love someone, when you've built a whole life around them, you find ways to explain the cracks in the wall. You paint over them. You tell yourself houses settle, marriages settle, people settle. I started replaying moments, stringing them together like puzzle pieces I didn't know were part of the same picture. 6 months ago, Lindsay's schedule changed. She said her company was reorganizing, adding later hours, more team dinners, happy hours, strategy retreats. Nothing exciting, she told me. Just more work. But suddenly, she was unreachable in the evenings. Her texts slowed. Her calls got shorter. I'd ask how her night went, and she'd mumble something vague. Fine. Boring. Always in a rush to hang up. I remember one night in particular, late February. I woke up around 2 a.m. and reached over. The bed was empty. Her side was cold. I walked through the house, heart already pounding. Found her curled up on the living room couch with the TV on low, face turned away. She said she couldn't sleep. But the part one didn't admit to myself until now. She wasn't startled when I found her. She didn't look up in surprise or guilt. She just looked blank, like she wasn't really there. And I let it go. Then there was the phone. It used to be just another object in the house. She'd leave it in the kitchen while she showered. It would sit face up on the nightstand. She used to ask me to read her texts if her hands were wet while cooking. Then slowly things shifted. The screen started facing down. Notifications went silent. She took it into the bathroom every time. Once, I walked into the room while she was texting and she jumped like I'd shouted. Said she was just startled. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe her. There were more things. Little details that stuck in my mind now like burrs. She stopped asking to visit my parents with me. Said she was drained. Said weekends were her only time to relax. My mom asked me once, quietly, gently, if everything was okay between us. I laughed it off. Said work had just been crazy. Lindsay was busy. We were fine. We weren't. Her brothers, Kyle and Evan, moved in after their mom passed. Temporarily, she said. I didn't push back. I wanted to be the supportive husband. For a while it worked. They helped around the house, cooked, joked with me. Then something changed. They stopped laughing at my jokes. Stopped talking to me unless they had to. One night I caught Kyle looking at me like I just wandered into the wrong room. I thought maybe it was grief, or just guys being moody. But now I wondered, had they known? Had they been covering for her? Had everyone? I remembered the new perfume. She used to wear the same kind for years. Something citrusy, soft. One day it changed. It was bolder, sharper. I mentioned it, thinking maybe it was a gift or a sample. She said she bought it on sale, didn't make a big deal about it. But she wore it constantly, even to run errands. And she came back glowing in a way that had nothing to do with shopping. That glow, it wasn't for me anymore. And I knew it. And there were clothes. Lingerie I hadn't seen before, drying on a towel in the bathroom. You bought something new? I asked once. She said she had a coupon. The truth was, we hadn't been in * made in weeks. Months even. And when we were, she seemed distant. Almost like she was performing a scene in a play she'd outgrown. She'd turn the lights off completely. Go quiet. Barely touch me. I didn't press her. I thought maybe she was tired. Maybe it was just a phase. I kept giving her space, thinking it would bring us closer. But space is where secrets grow. And still, I didn't confront her. Even after that photo that should have been a flashing red alarm, I let her walk me in circles with stories about Krista and broken AC units and convenient coincidences. I let her tell me it was my fault for being away. And maybe, in some twisted way, I believed her. Because if I believed her, then I didn't have to do the hard thing. I didn't have to blow up the life we'd built. I didn't have to start over. But that belief cracked every time I remembered something else. Like the time she came home after midnight and said her coworker's car had broken down. She didn't look tired. She looked flushed. Her lipstick was too perfect for someone who'd been helping change a tire. Or the hotel charge on our joint card from a city she never mentioned traveling to. I booked it for a friend, she'd said. Long story, but it was easier to put it on our card and Venmo later. The Venmo never showed up. And I didn't follow up. Because deep down I already knew. And yet I kept hoping that I was wrong. That I was inventing shadows. That the cracks in the walls were just signs of settling, not collapse. But now, I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unfeel it. This woman, the one I married, the one I trusted, was pulling away piece by piece. I'd convinced myself for months that we were just going through something. That every couple had lulls. That work stress, family pressure, grief, all of it could explain the distance. But what it couldn't explain was the int * Macy that had vanished. The secrets. The constant, quiet rewriting of reality. And the way she looked at me lately, like a roommate she didn't choose. Like a liability. Like a man who could be blamed for anything that went wrong. I used to think our love was unshakable, real in the way only long-term things are. But what I saw now was a slow erosion. Pattern. A woman who no longer saw me as a partner, but a presence to manage. And now that the suspicion had turned to memory to evidence, I realized something even worse. She wasn't going to stop. Not because she was in love with someone else necessarily. Not because she was planning to leave. But because I made it easy. I was predictable. Forgiving. Absent enough to give her freedom. Present enough to take the blame. And she had learned that if she pushed, I'd retreat. If she lied, I'd hesitate. If she spun the narrative, I'd follow. Until now. Because now, the pieces weren't scattered anymore. They formed a picture. Clear one. And even though I hadn't said it out loud yet, I had finally crossed that line inside myself. the one where denial ends and decision begins. After the photo, after the excuses, after the night I laid in bed trying to pretend it was all still salvageable, something in me broke. Not in a dramatic throw a chair through a window kind of way. Quietly, internally, like the last thread in a shirt you've worn for too long snapping under the weight of nothing. I woke up the next morning knowing I couldn't keep living in that fog of doubt. Not another day. I had to know. Not just feel. No. That's when I remembered the cameras. Sounds funny in hindsight. I had forgotten about them. Installed the system last fall when there was a wave of break-ins in the neighborhood. Lindsay never liked them. Said they made the house feel paranoid. So we only set them to motion-triggered recording. Just outside-facing cameras. Nothing inside. But the front door camera had a clean angle of the porch. And if someone had come to the house, someone who didn't belong, maybe it had caught something. I told Lindsay I had a breakfast meeting. Grabbed my laptop, drove to a coffee shop a few miles away, and logged into the cloud portal I hadn't touched in months. The last footage synced? The day after I left for Dallas. My heart pounded as I clicked through the thumbnails, searching for movement. There it was. Tuesday, 6:42 p.m. The porch light flicked on. A figure approached. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't knock. Just casually walked up the path like he'd done it a dozen times. Tall, athletic build, hoodie unzipped, arm tattoo peeking out. He had that same bracelet, braided leather, worn in the one I saw in the photo. And then I saw something else. Lindsay opening the door. Smiling. He leaned in, kissed her cheek. No hesitation. No looking over his shoulder. She didn't flinch. She reached for his waist like it was muscle memory. They walked inside together, her hands still on him. I sat there in that cafe, surrounded by people sipping lattes and scrolling through their own quiet mornings, feeling like I had just been split open. I watched the timestamp tick by. 6:43, 6:44, 6:45. Nothing. No more movement. Just an empty porch and a front door that stayed shut all night. He didn't leave. Not until Wednesday morning. 5:58 a.m. The door opened again. Same guy. Hair messy, sweatshirt now tied around his waist. He stepped out like he had just woken up from a full night's sleep. Walked to his car, parked just off-screen, and drove away. No hug goodbye. No secret glances. Just routine. Like this wasn't the first time. My stomach turned. I played the footage back, slower this time, catching every detail. The way she touched his back as he walked in. The fact that she wasn't glancing around like someone worried about being seen. She wasn't nervous. She was confident, because she believed I'd never look. And honestly, until that moment I wouldn't have. I closed the laptop, stared at my reflection in the dark screen. I felt like a fool. Not for being cheated on, though that stung in a way I can't quite describe, but for believing her lies even when the truth had been right there. All the questions I'd pushed away came flooding in now. Why had her tone shifted so quickly after I mentioned the photo? Why had she rehearsed the alibi before I even accused her of anything? Why had she needed to twist the conversation into being about me? Because she was never going to admit it, even when caught. Even when the truth was sitting on my screen in high definition, with timestamps and receipts and evidence I never wanted. She would have let me live in that fog forever. As I drove back home, I didn't feel anger, not yet. What I felt was a cold clarity. The kind that settles in your bones and changes your voice. The kind that whispers, she's not who you thought she was, and maybe she never was. I didn't go home right away. I parked a block away and walked for a while. Phone in my pocket, thoughts unraveling faster than I could contain them. I remembered when we first moved into that house. The night we painted the guest room until midnight, arguing about whether eggshell was too boring. I remembered how she danced barefoot in the kitchen when I surprised her with wine and sushi after she got the promotion. I remembered the night she cried after her mother died, curled up in my arms saying she didn't know how to be okay again. All of that felt like another life. And maybe it was. Because the woman who opened that door with a smile for someone else, the one who kissed him without fear, who let him into the home we built, that woman wasn't grieving. She wasn't lonely. She was gone. When I finally walked through the front door, Lindsay was on the phone. She ended the call quickly, glanced at me and said, "You're home early again." I nodded, said I didn't feel well. She didn't press. I didn't tell her what I saw. Not yet. I wanted to understand what kind of person I was dealing with now. Not the woman I married, the one I fell in love with years ago, but the woman who had turned our home into a lie and then gaslit me for daring to notice. So I watched her. For the next 2 days I said almost nothing. I worked from home, stayed in the office, barely made eye contact. I watched her move around the house like nothing had happened, like she hadn't dismantled our trust piece by piece and handed it to a stranger. She was careful now, but not in a way that showed guilt, in a way that showed she was recalibrating. Watching me, measuring how much I knew. On Thursday, she brought home takeout from my favorite place. Said she missed us. Tried to make small talk. Told me Krista was visiting again soon, probably with her boyfriend. I almost laughed, because now I knew. I had the footage downloaded, backed up in 3 places. I saved it to a drive hidden in my office, uploaded a copy to a private folder only I could access. If she decided to spin things in the future, I was ready. There was no ambiguity. No grainy, shadowy maybe he's a friend footage. It was her. And him. On our porch. Kissing. Embracing. Sleeping under our roof. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. She had let him into the space we made together. The one filled with photos of us on vacations, wedding gifts from family, the throw blanket my aunt had knitted us as an engagement present. And she had done it without hesitation. That's when the anger came. Not loud. Not explosive. But heavy. I carried it in my chest like a weight I couldn't drop. A silent knowing that this us was no longer real. That everything from this moment on would be performance unless I changed the script. But I didn't confront her that night either. Not because I was scared. Because I wanted the exit to be clean. Controlled. I needed to move methodically. Not emotionally. And if I was going to dismantle this house of cards, I wanted to make sure I did it without giving her a single excuse to flip the narrative again. Because this time I had the truth. And the truth wasn't something she could explain away with a nervous laugh, a shifting story, or a tearful, "You're just being distant." This time I wasn't the one guessing. This time I had her lies documented. And I was done pretending not to see them. I didn't confront her. Not after the photo. Not after the footage. Not after watching her smile for a man who didn't live in our home, and whose name she had never once said aloud in my presence. I thought about it 100 times. I imagined every version. The dramatic reveal, the controlled interrogation, the subtle slip of "I know." But every scenario ended the same. Her spinning the story, flipping the blame, calling me paranoid, distant, or worse. So I chose something different. Instead of demanding the truth, I decided to test the balance of things. Shake the tree, see what falls. Not because I needed more evidence, I already had the whole damn movie. But because I wanted to know how deep this went. How many people were in on it. How many had quietly replaced loyalty with convenience. I started with a simple conversation. Over dinner one night, takeout again because she'd stopped cooking without explanation, I brought up our finances. "I've been looking over our monthly expenses," I said casually, watching her reaction without looking at her. "It's getting tight. I think we should cut back." She blinked, mid-bite. "Tight? We're fine." "We've been overspending," I said. "I think it's time we split more of the bills down the middle. Groceries, subscriptions, utilities. Fair is fair, right?" There it was. Just a flicker, the twitch in her brow. That pause between chewing and answering. She swallowed too hard. "I thought we agreed you'd handle most of that," she said, softer now. "Because of the difference in our incomes." "I know," I said. "But things have changed. I want to rebalance. Just for a while." She didn't respond immediately. Just looked down at her food like the answer might be hiding in the sauce. "Okay," she said finally. "If that's what you want." She smiled like it was no big deal, but her eyes had already left the room. Her face said, "Fine." Her silence said, "Problem." That was test 1. Test 2 came the next morning. Her brothers, Kyle and Evan, had been living with us for almost a year now. First, it made sense. Their mom passed away, and Lindsay wanted to keep the family close. I agreed. I always did. I even helped paint their rooms, put together the cheap IKEA furniture, upgraded the Wi-Fi so they could stream games and work without lag. But lately, they'd stopped speaking to me entirely. Evan barely nodded when I walked into the kitchen. Kyle kept his headphones on during conversations. It was like I didn't exist. Or worse, I existed but only as background noise. The guy who paid for heat and lights and never got invited to their side of the table. So I tested them too. That morning, I sat at the counter while they made their usual massive breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon, like they were preparing to build a log cabin after, and said, "Hey guys, just a heads up. We're adjusting some things. I'll need you both to start contributing toward the utilities and groceries. Nothing crazy. Just $100 each monthly. Fair?" Evan stopped mid-toast. Kyle didn't turn around. "You serious?" Kyle said, flipping bacon like it was war rations. "Yeah," I said, "just trying to keep things balanced. It's temporary." Evan finally spoke. "You said we were good, that we didn't have to worry about rent or bills. That's why we moved here." "That was a year ago," I replied. "Things change. Everyone's got to chip in." They didn't argue. Not really. They just exchanged a look. One of those wordless, brotherly signals that said, "He's flipping." And then they went silent. They didn't say no. They just said less. That was all I needed. Because the next part of the plan, I didn't even have to initiate it. 2 days later, I came home from work and couldn't get in. At first I thought the lock jammed. Our old front door always stuck in the summer. But my key didn't work. I tried again, harder. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I stood there, suitcase in hand, staring at my own front door like a stranger. Then I saw them, my belongings. Not all, but some. Pair of boots. A duffel bag. A stack of books and files I usually kept in my home office. All placed neatly in 2 canvas tote bags and a cardboard box marked with my name in black Sharpie. Sitting at the edge of the porch like a donation pile. And taped to the top was a note. "You chose your money. We choose peace. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't even read it twice. I just laughed. Out loud. In the middle of the porch. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed every silent suspicion I'd ever tried to swallow. They hadn't seen me as family in months. Maybe longer. To them, I was a provider. A bank. A predictable, spineless ATM who let them eat and sleep under his roof without question. And the second I asked for balance, for contribution, I was dead weight. That night, I checked into a short-term rental. Furnished. Quiet. Nothing fancy. Just a 1-bedroom place with working locks, clean sheets, and nobody else's fingerprints on the thermostat. I didn't call Lindsay. Didn't respond to her text either. Because she did text, not right away, but a few hours after I left. It said, "You didn't have to do it this way." No punctuation. No apology. Just that vague implication that somehow I had brought this on myself. That I had escalated things by wanting her to split grocery bills while she secretly hosted someone else in our bed. I didn't reply, because I saw the truth now, clear and unforgiving. None of them had been here for me. Not Lindsay. Not Kyle. Not Evan. They had been here for what I gave them. And the second I stopped giving, they stopped pretending. It was transactional. The entire thing. And I had been too in love, too tired, too hopeful to see it for what it was. I changed the passwords to our shared bank account that night. Disabled her card. Removed her from the streaming services, the phone plan, the car insurance. Canceled the auto payments on anything that bled out of my income and into their lifestyle. I felt cold doing it. Mechanical. But that coldness? It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. They changed the locks on me, boxed up my life without a conversation. So I returned the favor. Digitally. Legally. Financially. I called my lawyer the next morning. Told him I wanted to move forward. Not just with a divorce, but with reclaiming the property. The lease was in my name. Lindsay and her brothers? They were unauthorized occupants now. He told me we had a strong case. And that was the first time in weeks I felt something like peace. Not relief. Not closure, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing that you're not crazy, that you did notice the signs, and that finally you're doing something about them. The house I left behind was no longer my home. It was just a building, a hollow place filled with people who looked at me and saw a wallet. And I was done pretending they loved me. I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't call her and demand answers or closure or some last desperate monologue to make sense of it all. Instead, I stood on that porch for a few seconds longer than I needed to, just looking at the box with my name on it, the sharp bleeding slightly through the tape. My life reduced to items small enough to carry in one trip. It was almost surgical how cleanly they had removed me. So I left. Not because I was giving up, but because I was done playing the part they wrote for me. The next morning I called my attorney again. His name was Riley. Calm, efficient, the type who wore wire-rimmed glasses and rarely needed to raise his voice. I sent him copies of everything. The camera footage, the financial records, a timeline of events going back nearly a year. I want them out of the house, I said. You have every right, he replied. Legally, you're the sole leaseholder. She's not on the contract, correct? Never was, I said. Her name's not on anything. Not the deed, not the bills, not the insurance. I covered everything. Then this will be straightforward, he told me. We'll begin formal eviction proceedings for all unauthorized occupants. Do not respond to any contact from them directly. Let me handle everything. I hung up, feeling nothing. That was the strange part. I expected relief, rage, sadness maybe, but what I felt was blank. Like someone had finally turned off the emotional static in my head. The truth was, I had already grieved this marriage. I just hadn't realized it. Every time I excused her behavior, forgave the distance, let her lies pass without pushback. That was mourning. Quiet, daily, invisible mourning. Now I was done with that. My next call was to the bank. I had joint cards with Lindsay, not because she asked, but because I'd offered. I thought it was the responsible thing to do at the time. We were married. Married people shared things. They planned for the future together. I canceled every shared card that afternoon. Froze the joint account. Rerouted all auto payments. Changed the passwords on every app I'd once let her log into. Streaming services, cloud storage, rideshare accounts. I even locked her out of the grocery delivery account. That one made me laugh a little. It was all so easy. Easier than it should have been. The hardest part? None of them noticed right away. I watched our old house from a distance. Not physically. I wasn't staking it out like some jilted ex. I still had access to the camera app, and one of the doorbell cameras I'd forgotten to disconnect was still live. I checked it once or twice each day, watching Kyle come and go, Lindsay pacing around on the phone, Evan bringing in deliveries paid for by an account I just shut down. No one called to ask why the cable was cut, or why their meal kit subscription failed, or why Lindsay's Uber account was suddenly locked, because they weren't confused. They were expecting it. They knew this was over. They just hoped to drain it dry before the doors closed. But I was faster than they thought. I stopped being predictable the moment they boxed my life up and taped that note to it. The first official letter from my lawyer went out within 48 hours. A cease and desist regarding any further access to my accounts and a demand for vacancy of the premises. Riley told me the legal process might take a couple weeks, but that everything was moving in my favor. Don't engage, he reminded me. Let them reach out. Just don't respond. So I didn't, but they did. First it was Lindsay. The text started simple. We should talk. Then, you're overreacting. Followed by, can we just sit down like adults? No mention of what she did. No apology. Not even an acknowledgement of the man in the camera footage. Just vague language like this was some mild disagreement over laundry habits. I didn't reply. Then came the brothers. Kyle texted me one morning. First time he'd spoken to me directly in weeks. Man, this is getting out of hand. We were just trying to survive. You left us no choice. Survive. As if asking two grown men to contribute to a household they'd been freeloading in for almost a year was some act of cruelty. Then Evan chimed in. You really gonna throw your wife out like she's a stranger? She gave you everything. I read the message twice, laughed. What exactly had she given me? Silence? Blame? A carefully rehearsed script every time I got too close to the truth? It wasn't until I received a voicemail from Lindsay, actual words, not just text, that I realized the tide was shifting. She sounded different, not smug, not angry, something quieter. "Colin," she said, voice low and shaky. "I don't know how it got this far. I didn't want to hurt you. I know I did. But maybe we can still talk. I miss you. I really do." I played it 3 times, trying to feel something. I expected to. But the ache that used to live in my chest, that tight, suffocating dread, it wasn't there anymore. Because I had finally stopped seeing her as the woman I married, and started seeing her as the woman who changed the locks on me. Her messages kept coming, softer each time. She sent old photos, *TS of inside jokes, one-liner memories meant to sting with nostalgia. "Remember our anniversary in Asheville? Still think about that dumb road trip playlist you made. You were my best friend." I didn't reply, because those memories weren't invitations, they were bait. A net cast to see if I was still caught. But I wasn't. I was methodical now, focused. I filed for divorce officially that week. Riley helped me include everything: the financial records, video proof, and a formal complaint of infidelity and abandonment. I wasn't interested in dragging her name through the mud. I just wanted the court to see the reality she worked so hard to rewrite. That I had supported her, protected her, trusted her, and she had used that trust to erase me. Legally, everything was moving fast. Lindsay had no claim to the property, no financial contributions, no documented ownership. The judge saw that clearly. What shocked me most was how quiet she became after being served. No more texts, no more voicemails, no last-ditch attempt to twist the story. Just silence, which told me everything. She never planned to fight for the marriage. She just didn't want to be cut off, didn't want to lose access to the lifestyle I had built. She wanted the illusion of us, not the work of it. The day the divorce papers were filed, I changed the last piece of the puzzle. The locks. Not on the house. On myself. I stopped looking at the camera app. I stopped checking for her name in my inbox. I stopped giving her the space in my head I used to reserve for loving her. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about reclamation. Piece by piece, I had let her shrink me, undermine my instincts, rewrite the truth until I barely recognized it. Now I was undoing all of that. Quietly, completely, without a single wasted word.